Lara's life shattered the day her uncle forced her into a dress that sparked a devastating misunderstanding, leaving her branded as someone she wasn't. Alone, penniless, and with no one to turn to, she found herself trapped in a loveless contract marriage to the man who unknowingly fathered her child. What started as a cold arrangement soon spiraled into a fight for survival. But as danger closed in, Lara was forced to ask herself the ultimate question: who was truly behind her unhappiness? Was it her manipulative uncle, her cruel aunt, or the father of her child? Lara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the black key card she had slipped into her pocket earlier. Her heart was heavy with confusion and fear. The image of the scarred man watching her from the car lingered in her mind, but she decided against telling Femi. Lara, to herself, he has enough on his plate. He's already doing more than he has to. She put the key card in her bedside drawer, locking it away along with the unsettling memory. She lay down, but sleep refused to come. Femi had been distant lately, coming home late or sometimes not coming home at all. She wondered if he was still seeing other women at the hotel where they first met. It's none of my business, she thought to herself. She called her sister Temi, who was in the village, and promised to come pick her up soon, so she can live with her. Meanwhile, Femi sat at his desk in the office, staring at a family photo of him and Lara from their contract marriage ceremony. He sighed and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He told himself it was just for relaxation, but deep down, the memories of his ex-wife's betrayal and the guilt over Lara weighed heavily on him. His assistant knocked, breaking his train of thought. "Sir, Chief Douglas is here for the meeting," she said. Femi's eyes darkened, but he composed himself. "Send him in." Douglas entered, his presence commanding and smug. He sat without waiting to be invited, his sharp gaze sizing Femi up. "Ah, Femi, you've been avoiding me," Chief Douglas said. Femi leaned back in his chair, forcing a smile. "I've been busy, Chief. Some of us actually work," Femi answered, chuckling. "Fair enough. But we need to settle some unresolved matters," Chief Douglas said. Coldly, "I don't owe you anything," Femi shouted. Chief Douglas leaning in. "Not yet. But I hear you have something or someone precious to protect these days. A young wife, a baby on the way? Congratulations." Femi's face hardened. He realized the veiled threat, but refused to let it show. "Femi, stay away from my family, Douglas." Douglas smirked. "Family, huh? Well, Lagos is unpredictable. It would be a shame if anything. Unexpected things happened." He stood. "Take care, Femi, and keep an eye on your wife. She might attract attention you don't want." Femi clenched his fists under the desk, his anger boiling. As Douglas left, Femi's mind raced with questions. How did Douglas know about Lara? And what game was he playing? Meanwhile, Lara tried to settle into her routine, but the unease from the man following her hadn't gone away. She buried herself in her sewing projects from fashion school, trying to distract herself. But as she worked, she thought she saw a shadow pass by the window. She froze, her needles slipping from her hand. Lara, whispering to herself, "It's just your imagination. Stop overthinking." She got up and checked the window, but there was no one there. She locked all the doors and windows, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. Meanwhile, a black car idled a few houses away. Inside, the scarred man lit a cigarette, watching the faint light coming from Lara's window. He spoke into a phone. "She's alone. No security. What's the next move?" A gruff voice on the other end replied. "Not yet. Let her think she's safe. When the time is right, we'll take her." The scarred man grinned. Easy job. She's just a scared little girl. Meanwhile, Femi stared at his phone, debating whether to call Lara. He had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. But their relationship was strained. They barely spoke unless it was about the baby. She'd never tell me if something was wrong. She doesn't trust me, Femi said to himself. He poured another drink, guilt gnawing at him. For all his wealth and power, he felt helpless when it came to Lara. The next day, Lara and Femi sat in the same room for the first time in days. The atmosphere was tense, both of them avoiding eye contact. How was school? Femi asked. Lara shrugged, not looking up from her plate. Fine. Femi studied her for a moment. He could see the dark circles under her eyes and the stiffness in her shoulders. Lara, is something bothering you? He asked. She hesitated, her fork hovering over her food. No. I'm fine, she answered. But Femi wasn't convinced. You can tell me, if something's wrong. Lara forced a smile, hiding the turmoil inside her. I said I'm fine. Femi didn't push further. He made a mental note to double security around the house, just in case. After eating, they each went to their separate rooms to sleep. A few hours later, Lara began having a nightmare about her Uncle Bayo, who had fallen to the ground after the incident with the knife. She muttered his name in her sleep, begging him not to hurt her. Meanwhile, Femi was in his room when he heard noises coming from Lara's room and went to check on her. He saw Lara tossing and turning, trapped in her nightmare. Guilt washed over him. He blamed himself for her condition, thinking that if he had been more careful, she wouldn't be suffering like this. He silently vowed to protect her, no matter the cost. Femi quickly woke Lara up and pulled her into a hug. He stayed by her side that night. Lara was surprised to see Femi, so worried. He's only concerned because of the baby, she thought to herself. Still, as he held her close, she felt something unexpected, a sense of safety and security. She hugged him tightly, letting herself feel comforted. The next morning, Lara woke up to the smell of food coming from the kitchen. She was surprised to find Femi there making breakfast. When he saw her, he served the food and asked her to sit down and eat. Lara was touched by his kindness. It had been so long since anyone had taken care of her like this, not since her parents passed away. As soon as she sat down to eat, though, she rushed to the bathroom to throw up. Femi panicked, thinking the food he made didn't taste or smell good. He didn't realize it was just morning sickness. Concerned, he told Lara to get dressed so they could go to the hospital. After the scan, the doctor smiled and shared the news. It was a baby boy. Femi was thrilled, but kept his excitement to himself. He still couldn't believe it. He was going to be a father. The thought of his ex-wife suddenly came to his mind, and Femi's mood darkened. He had promised himself never to fall in love with another woman again. His expression grew serious, and he told Lara that he needed to go to the office. On the way, he dropped her off at home. Lara noticed his sudden change in mood, but decided not to say anything. After all, he was just the father of her baby and meant nothing more to her. When Femi got to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about Lara. He wondered what was wrong with him. He had sworn not to get involved with another woman after his ex-wife's betrayal. He had even promised Lara that once the baby was born, they would go their separate ways. Later that day, his ex-wife, Victoria, walked into his office. Femi was furious. He wondered who had let her in. She smiled and tried to get close to him, but Femi shouted at her to leave and told her he never wanted to see her again. Victoria was stunned by his reaction. Femi had never resisted her before, even after she cheated on him with his friend. What has changed? Could it be because of this new woman? I'll find a way to get him back, she thought to herself. Meanwhile, Lara woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She picked up her phone. It was a text from an unknown number. You can't hide forever, Lara. Her blood ran cold. She stared at the message, her hands shaking. Who was this? How did they know her name? She deleted the message and put the phone down, but her mind was spinning. The fear she had been trying to suppress bubbled to the surface. Meanwhile, after his ex-wife left, Femi sat at his desk, reviewing contracts, but his mind was elsewhere. Every attempt to focus was drowned out by thoughts of Lara. His finger tapped impatiently against his phone and finally, he gave in. He dialed her number, but the call didn't connect. He tried again. Still no answer. A knot tightened in his chest as Chief Douglas's warning echoed in his mind. She's not picking up? Why isn't she picking up? Femi muttered to himself. Panic set in. Without hesitation, Femi grabbed his car keys and stormed out of his office. His assistant barely had time to step aside as he marched past. His employees exchanged confused glances as they watched their normally composed boss hurry out, his face lined with worry. The sudden sound of the front door slamming open made Lara jump. She spun around to see Femi standing in the doorway, his face filled with panic. His eyes scanned the room as he stepped inside, his voice loud and frantic. Lara? Lara? Are you okay? What's going on? Femi shouted. Lara stood frozen, startled by his sudden arrival. I'm fine. Why are you shouting? She asked. Femi approached her, his voice rising as his fear turned into frustration. I've been calling you. Why is your phone off? Do you know how worried I've been? A phone is a simple thing, Lara. Anyone can handle it, he shouted at her. Lara flinched at the tone of his voice, her own emotions threatening to boil over. The stress of the mysterious message, her pregnancy, and now Femi's outburst was too much to bear. She suddenly burst into tears, her body shaking as she sobbed. I can't do this anymore, she cried. Femi froze, guilt washing over him as he saw her tears. His anger dissolved instantly, replaced by concern. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Lara, I'm sorry. Don't cry, please. He reached out and pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her trembling body against his chest. Femi, whispering, I didn't mean to yell. I was scared something happened to you. I hate seeing you like this. Lara's sobs quieted as she rested her head against his shoulder. For a moment, the world around them faded. Femi gave Lara a new cell phone as a gift to lift her mood. For Lara, this was a surprise, as she hadn't received a gift from anyone in a very long time. Overwhelmed with happiness, she hugged Femi tightly, almost like an excited child. However, the weight of her past still haunted her. The trauma she had endured left her with nightmares every night. In her dreams, she often saw her uncle trying to hurt her, which made her wake up screaming. Femi, concerned about her, gently asked, What's wrong, Lara? What are you so afraid of? At first, Lara hesitated, unsure if she could share the truth. Even though she felt that Femi didn't truly love her, she knew he was dependable and kind. Finally, she opened up and told him everything about her uncle, the horrors she had faced, how she had stabbed her uncle, and her fear of being imprisoned for what she had done to protect herself, which could harm her child's future. Femi listened quietly, his expression softening as she spoke. He pulled her into his arms and said gently, Don't worry. I'll make sure nothing happens to you or the baby. That night, as Lara finally fell asleep, Femi stayed by her side, sitting in a chair to keep watch over her. He didn't move the entire night, making sure she felt safe. His kindness and care touched Lara deeply, stirring emotions in her heart that she didn't expect. Femi hired a private investigator to find out what happened to Lara's uncle. The investigator brought troubling news. Lara's uncle had been missing for several months, and there was no case for his murder. He also revealed that the uncle was involved in smuggling and other illegal activities. Hearing this, Femi became worried that the uncle might still be alive and could try to take revenge on Lara. To keep her and the baby safe, Femi made a decision. He would start working from home so he could always be there to protect her. Meanwhile, Chief Douglas sat with Bayo, Lara's uncle. The two men shared a bottle of expensive whiskey. "Your niece is tougher than she looks," Chief Douglas said. Bayo laughed bitterly. "She's stubborn, but she'll crack." "They all do," Bayo replied. Douglas smirked. "Femi's distracted. If we play this right, we can hit him where it hurts most, his pride. And the girl, well, she's just collateral." The two men clinked their glasses, their sinister plan taking shape. Meanwhile, Femi and Lara's love for each other grew stronger. Femi always made sure Lara was safe. He hired a security guard to accompany her to school every day. One day, while Femi was at work, he received an urgent call about a business meeting at a hotel. Before heading there, he called Lara to let her know about the meeting. Lara offered to come with him, but Femi refused, saying he didn't want her to stress herself. He promised to return home as soon as the meeting ended. They both smiled and exchanged words of love before ending the call. Later that evening, Lara waited for hours, but Femi didn't come back. She tried calling him, but he wasn't answering. Then, she received a text message from him saying she should meet him at the hotel, that he had a surprise for her. He sent her the room number and told her to take a taxi instead of bothering the security guard. But what Lara didn't know was that it was all part of a plan. Excited and a little curious, Lara got dressed and went to the hotel. When she opened the door to the room, her heart dropped. Femi was lying on the bed, fast asleep, and there was another woman beside him. Empty bottles of alcohol were scattered all over the room. Lara froze in shock. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Memories of how she first met Femi came flooding back, how he had mistaken her for a prostitute. She had thought he had changed, but this made her question everything. As she walked out of the room, another woman approached her. She was stunningly beautiful and carried herself with confidence. "I'm Femi's ex-wife," she said with a smirk. Lara stood speechless as the woman continued. "This is why I left him. He sleeps around and gets women pregnant, just like he did with you. Do you really think he loves you? Femi will never get over his love for me. You're just another one of his conquests," she said. The words hit Lara like a punch. She was left speechless, tears welling up in her eyes as she turned and ran out of the hotel. She rushed home, her heart completely shattered. She couldn't believe Femi had betrayed her like this. Determined that she couldn't stay any longer, she began packing her belongings, tears streaming down her face. But as she entered her bedroom, a cold chill ran through her. Something felt wrong. She could sense that someone else was in the house. She grabbed her phone, ready to call for help, but stopped. Lara, whispering, "Femi won't help me, not after what he's done." Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Who's there? What do you want?" Lara asked. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Lara gasped. It was her uncle, Bayo, grinning wickedly. "Found you," he said, his voice cold and menacing. Lara's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you doing here?" Stay away from me, Lara shouted. Beo's smirk widened as he leaned closer. You're coming with me, Lara. If you try anything funny, I'll go straight for your sister, Temi. Do you understand? Lara froze at the mention of her sister. Tears filled her eyes as she pleaded with him. Please don't hurt Temi. I'll come with you. Just leave her alone, Lara pleaded. Beo gestured for her to follow him. With no other choice, Lara stepped outside. A black car was waiting, and inside was the scarred man she had seen before, sitting in the driver's seat. Get in, Beo shouted. Lara hesitated but obeyed, her mind racing as she climbed into the car. The door slammed shut, and the car sped off into the night. Meanwhile, Femi woke up in the hotel room and immediately realized something was wrong. He felt groggy and disoriented, and then he noticed the woman lying beside him. Shocked and confused, he sat up and started questioning her. Who are you? How did you get here? What is this? He asked. The woman panicked and tried to leave, but Femi grabbed her arm and demanded answers. You're not going anywhere. Tell me the truth right now or I will call the police, he demanded. Terrified, the woman broke down and confessed everything. It wasn't my idea. Your ex-wife planned everything. She made a deal with me. She told the waiter to drug your drink after your meeting, and once you passed out, she brought me here to sit beside you. Then she used your phone to text your wife to come over. Femi's eyes widened in anger and disbelief. Why would she do this? He asked. She wanted to scare your wife. She thought if Lara left you, she could have you back. But that's not all. Chief Douglas and Lara's uncle were also involved. They've been working together to get you out of the way so Douglas can take over your business deals. Femi was furious. He wasted no time. He called the police, and both his ex-wife and Chief Douglas were arrested. However, Lara's uncle had disappeared, and no one knew where he had taken her. Femi was devastated. The police had assured him they would do everything to find Lara, but he couldn't sleep or eat. His mind was consumed with worry, imagining all the terrible things her uncle might be doing to her. I should have protected her. I should have been there, he murmured to himself. Just then his phone rang. He answered quickly, and a rough voice spoke on the other end. If you want your wife back, bring the ransom. No police, or you'll never see her again. Without hesitation, Femi grabbed the money and rushed to the location they gave him. Few days later, Femi slowly opened his eyes and found himself lying in a hospital bed. His body ached, but when he turned his head, he saw Lara sitting beside him, tears streaming down her face. You're awake, she said. Femi managed a weak smile. You're safe. That's all that matters, Femi replied. He remembered what had happened. Lara's uncle had tried to shoot her, but Femi had thrown himself in front of the bullet, shielding her and their unborn child. You saved my life, and our babies. Her voice trembled with emotion. She leaned over and hugged him gently, her heart full of gratitude. A few months later, Lara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Femi couldn't stop doting on her and their son, showering them with love and attention. He promised himself he would always protect his family. Lara's younger sister, Temi, came to live with them, bringing joy and laughter to their home. Over the years, Lara worked hard, balancing motherhood and her studies. Finally, she graduated and fulfilled her dream of starting her own business. Their family was stronger than ever, built on love, trust, and the challenges they had overcome together. In the end, Lara and Femi realized that love is not just about words, but about actions. Bullying in any form can destroy lives and leave deep scars. Say no to bullying. Choose love and kindness.